Thank you. All right, so David, I will ask you, turn it over to you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Ms. Arney. This is David Edwards with the North Carolina Board of Physical Therapy Examiners, calling this meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee to order on May 19th, 2021 at 9:06 a.m. Eastern Time. We would like to welcome any public members to the meeting. If you do have questions, please raise your hand to be recognized. Do we at this time have any public members in attendance?
No, we do not.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward with the conflict statement.
I can share my screen unless you've got it in front of you, David. And
I have it.
Okay, great.
Okay, in accordance with Executive Order 127, at the beginning of each meeting, the chair shall remind the members of their duty to avoid conflicts and appearances of conflict and inquire as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board. Individual members must make a diligent effort before taking any action, including participation in discussion, to determine whether a conflict or appearance of conflict exists. Individual members have an affirmative duty to inquire of their business associates, families, and close friends of any issues that may come before the board. If a member has a question regarding his or her particular situation, that member should ask direction from the chair, or in the event of the chair's unavailability, the vice chair. Are there any known or potential conflicts of interest among the attendees today?
No.
Let the record note that there are no conflicts of interest reported. Okay. Let's see. There was a public notice of the meeting properly posted and published. There was notice of the meeting mailed, emailed, communicated to appropriate government officials and those requesting the agenda. Let's see.
There actually were no requests for this agenda, just for the record.
For the record, okay. All right. Kathy, am I taking notes on this, or this is the first time doing this?
Right, and no, I pretty much I handle the minutes, and when you all read them, if you've got your own, I try to get them out pretty quickly so that before it leaves all of our minds. If you've got other things you think we should add, I'll do it quickly so that.
And I've just got a quick little notepad where I'm taking little general notes if there's
yeah, same.
Okay,
Thanks.
I want to make sure I live up to Crystal's legacy.
That's right.
Okay, so that brings us to section C. Ms. Arney, will you be reviewing the reference materials?
Certainly. So with the agenda, you all were sent the following attachments: just a general memo describing the status of the year and the proposed budget considerations, minutes from the last Finance and Audit Committee, which we'll review and approve shortly, a current profit and loss comparison statement, a current balance sheet statement, as reference, the adopted budget from fiscal year 2021, and the audit from fiscal year 2020. The corrected version, there was the original one that was submitted, and then the Comptroller's office asked us to do a small correction, which was done. So that's included if you want that for reference as well. And then a copy of the proposed budget for 2022. And that is on a sheet that is in comparison to last year's budget, just so you have that side by side. So before we move forward, do you want to look at those now or look at them more specifically as we go through each document or each other bulleted item?
Would it be most appropriate to review it at the time of each bullet item?
I think it's easier in context to take a look
Yeah.
at it that way.
So I think everybody's reviewed them in advance. So just as we go and discuss, we can look at it. And
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we can move on to D and reviewing the minutes from May 2020.
Do we need a motion to approve those?
Yes.
I move we approve the minutes from the May, was it May 2020? We did the meeting, or was it in June?
May 20th, 2020, exactly.
I thought I remembered reading May. Approve the May 2020 minutes.
Too many twos in here.
Yes.
Second.
Okay.
Madam Director, do we need to vote since there's only 2 voting members?
I think you need to because it's a public meeting. And so, because there are 2 of you here, we know who is voting which direction. And I can't recall now. I don't know if you were there for the whole part, David, yesterday, where they reviewed that law where the public nature of these meetings, especially on Zoom, was reviewed and what we have to do. I'm supposed to be, or the chair is supposed to be calling the roll so that you have an individual vote for each person. Now, David Gadd and I were texting back and forth during that training yesterday, and I said, do we have to do that? And he said, if it's unanimous, no, you're not going to have to do that. So, but I at the same time, you still have to take the vote.
Okay. There's a motion to approve the minutes from the May 20th, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Any abstaining? Motion carries. Minutes are approved.
Thank you.
Okay, and Director Arnie, assuming you'll be reviewing the status of the budget.
Yes. So if you will take a look at your profit and loss statement and the balance sheets that you were submitted or that were sent to you with the agenda. And you look, maybe go to the balance sheet first and look at the last page, page 2, total liabilities and equity. We've got in April, the one that was originally sent to you was April 30th, 2021. The total is $3,460,997. And if you look at last year, that's almost $400,000 more than last year. I think what I'm observing about myself, and assisted by the pandemic, I tend to be a very conservative budgeter to begin with. That said, I don't think anyone is being paid unfairly. The benefits are great. The board office has what it needs to be able to do the work given to it by the or enabled by the legislature. We have added 2 contractors to do software programming to really help us get where we need to go in terms of 100% online. So it is just that the pandemic helped us along by not spending any money, in terms of in-person meetings, any travel, and that includes board meetings, committee meetings, traveling to educational sessions, etc. But that said, that is more money than we had prior to the lawsuit, and probably significantly more. I think because the mission of the board is safety and public protection, I don't think that us continuing to increase the reserve is one of the goals intended by the legislature. So this amount of money is great, because in uncertain times you may end up spending that amount of money. And so I had Cindy do another update of this, which you'll see at the board meeting. But the financial auditor, Jerry Dodd, has now added the unanticipated, payroll account, or I guess he called it the payroll reserve account, which I don't see on the one that I sent you. So he's now added that to our designated reserves. And then he added another 100,000 to the information technology reserve, which the board voted on several years ago when Stu was still on the board.
Right.
So we have a really significant reserve. And I this is going to come into play when we discuss the potential reduction in fee for the renewal for 2022. I feel like it's healthy. And so then it really comes down to a matter of, how much should we have in reserve and how much risk we want to take with that, given that we live in, a little bit of uncertain times with, we haven't been through year 2 of this pandemic to know what the second fall and winter look like. Are these variants going to happen? And then on top of that, just knowing that it is likely that there will be other kinds of disease that mutate from other things that are going to be coming along. And so where do we want to sit as a board? And that's a thing for the two of you to sit with. And then, we make a recommendation to the board, and we don't have to decide it today. We can have, an additional discussion at the board meeting, but, we may want to come up with a tentative recommendation for them. So I wanted to point that out to you specifically. If you go back to page 1 of the balance sheet, you're also going to see that we still have all these accounts sitting out there. If you look under current assets, the board had voted to consolidate into Pinnacle, and within Pinnacle, they diversify the portfolio. And I can see that because I'm seeing the statements that come in and how they're diversifying it. And so far, so good. They keep everything FDIC insured. So by doing that consolidation, it's a lot less hands-on money management for the board office. Let me put it that way. So then it's more a matter of oversight for the board. And after we get all this consolidation done, then, we'll be able to share that kind of information at the board meetings. So the board can have that kind of oversight. So at this point, let me just say that after the board voted to do all the consolidation, this is about the time when Cindy's mom died. And so she hasn't gotten this done. She assures me that she'll have it done by June 9th. And, I'm hoping that that's true. There are a few accounts that still are like CDs that don't roll over until 2022. There might even be one in 2023. So it's still going to be, trickling in. But we're going to have that consolidated. We will still keep the PNC account, checking account, and money market open. because that's where currently all the money goes with online payments. And it's going to take another analysis and effort to determine if Pinnacle can really handle that. Right now, everything is very well connected with our third-party vendor, BluePay, for our online payments. And, undoing that's going to take some thought. So, we'll be down to Pinnacle and to PNC, within, I'm hoping the first quarter of next year for sure. And again, you can see pretty healthy balances there.
I think you guys have done a wonderful job, especially considering the technology enhancements and adding the labor and so forth. And so excellent job on that. Now is Cindy still technically on board?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for that. And it's really because the board voted to do that we can do that. So thank you. And I will tell you, the gal that we've hired, the second gal that we've hired is amazing. And I am looking forward to y'all seeing the first pass of the website at the meeting. She's just been super. And, even if we didn't like it, it can be changed. And she's a very fast worker, very experienced. And her name is Zulika. And she has kind of been running the team that's working on the website development. And I think, David, maybe you've had an opportunity, or if not in depth yet, will to give your input to that website effort. So that's all going really well. I think Greg has some plans with maybe modifying the other contractor, but I'm kind of waiting for him. It's more in his bailiwick than mine at this moment. Anyway, that to say, that's what's going on with IT. Cindy is going to be retiring December 31st, and that we're pretty clear on that now. What I have done is I have hired someone who is taking on Cindy's more administrative role, and she's here getting onboarded and is already amazing. We are digging into things that I have not had the chance or some of the background to dig into that have needed to be dug into. And, for example, a lot of personnel kinds of things. We're at the tail end of this payroll audit, really looking at the retirement agreement and what that really says about what we're required to do, different benefits. We're trying to see what we can do about keeping that more stable. We have a very generous benefits package, but we're also looking at getting everything very clear in terms of how people get onboarded and, are we paying the right amount in terms of what the market is for our benefits, that kind of thing. Then also she happens to have an HR background, partially because she used to work at Rex in Raleigh. And then she's, worked as an executive assistant to several CEOs of other companies. I think back in the day when it was MISIS, and I can't think of what they've morphed into now, but that big healthcare software company.
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then most recently, Genworth Financial. So she's got a really great background, and she's already modernized how we do our payroll and timesheets, the paperwork side of it, not the financial side. Going to the financial side of Cindy's role, I have felt for a while that we needed someone that has more of a bookkeeping background. That really wasn't a part of Cindy's prior training when she came to the board, but she evolved into it and does a great job. I think what we realize now is we've got to move this to more of an online thing. We're using QuickBooks Enterprise, which is big and cumbersome and probably was too big at the time. But, you know, the office was small. They were advised about what to get, what product to get. And it just doesn't have the flexibility we need to run the kinds of reports that I would like to see to, you know, I need it to be a little more nimble. And, you know, I think some of that Cindy admits was beyond her capability to really do. So I've interviewed a bookkeeper who came highly recommended, who independent, would work part-time and would not necessarily be in the office, but we would have her come to the office as we needed to pick up, drop off, and then, you know, provide the reports and come in for the monthly kind of analysis and review that we need and planning. And I think for the way the board is working now and the nature of work going forward at the board office, I think that's the combination of those two people doing the big role that Cindy had, that had so many wide and varied things to it, will allow those jobs. Pardon me?
I said the many components of the role, break it down into specialized aspects of it.
And I think it's just going to allow for the individuals doing those jobs to take a deeper dive into things that haven't had the chance to have the deeper dive in, you know, in quite a while. And which is also good because, you know, we've talked a bit about succession and transition planning, which, you know, for a board member that's maybe on for 3 years or even 6 for that matter, it's hard to think about, well, what would the board look like, or board office look like, if you lost one of your senior members? Well, there could be some really big gaps. And I think that this creates more of a cross-train and ability to have some of the pieces that really have been solely mine also being able to be done by other people.
Yeah.
And the oversight, then, you know, Debbie can do some of that. If something happened to me, if something happened to her, I used to do the job that she's doing. So I'm feeling more comfortable that we could handle transition a little better too. So I think, you know, also spreading these jobs out, you know, you could hire a bookkeeper if something happened to a bookkeeper, but you couldn't hire someone to do the very specialized job that Cindy was doing just right off the street. That would take a lot of training and somebody who knows a lot about it. So I think we're planning in the right direction, and things are, you know, becoming more automated and more electronically based, which is good because, you know, who knows what's going to happen in a couple of years as far as, you know, will we take all of this electronic, and will we have the need for an office presence? I don't know the answer to that question, by the way. It's just those are things that I think about. Or should an event in the universe happen that would force us in that direction, you know, we have those abilities. So that's where I'm kind of going. Back to the money piece. I feel like, you know, we're in a really good spot, and we have not had litigation for a couple of years now, which has allowed us to get, you know, to rebuild the resources that we have. So before we leave the balance sheet, do either of you have any specific questions about that right now? Accounts, liabilities, reserves?
Looks healthy.
I'd say it looks good.
Appropriate.
Okay, good. Then in terms of the profit and loss statement, one of the things that I've found hard about QuickBooks Enterprise is just the fact that once you start a category, it's really hard to eliminate. You can hide it, but you kind of have to keep it, or you can't see the stuff from the prior year and all that. Well, you know, when you look at the income, there's like so many incomes just for PT, you know, it makes your head spin. Basically, this is all the different kinds of applications we have. And previously, we also had people able to pay by check, now by credit card. And so you're really going down to the bottom of the income for each one. PT renewals, PTA renewals, and so that gives you a sense about where the majority of our income is coming from. If I start back up at the top, though, we've got a little bit of income under retirement forfeitures, which just basically means there was money left on the table when someone previously left. And I don't really know who or what that was, but we were told that we had it, so we can use it to pay some of our expenses for the retirement plan. This credit card cost for military should be very small, and it is, but the other credit card processing costs, is a very large chunk, but it's also then goes right back out because we have to pay for it, where it's basically a wash. And similarly, the FBI criminal background checks, it's got something exactly the same on the expense side. So those bits of income, that $100,000 is a wash in the end. So our main income, of course, is PT and PTA applications and renewals. When you look on page 2, well, I guess it's got PT and there's one under PTA as well, but this, licensee list income and I don't know where the exam retake fees are. Yeah, it's separately under PT and PTAs. All of that has gone away with the board's decision during COVID not to charge that. And in the budget, I did not put any income in that going forward. So that's just a little FYI. Then you get into, go ahead. Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm noticing on the continuing competence,
Mhm.
there's not a lot going on there. Has there been a change in by people seeking approval for credit, or what's the trend there?
Well, when the program was initiated, John's interpretation was that our board, that is not part of the main mission of our board, is to be an approving entity or to gain income from it. The reason why we even charge to begin with is because it costs staff time to do it, and the fees were attempted to be kept pretty low for licensees specifically, because it's $25 for licensees. And then it's more work if you wanted to become a provider. We have tried to really push that business toward APTA-NC for sure. And when ProCert was going on with FSBPT, we were, we would say that that's an option, but really more so just pushing it towards APTA-NC. So it's never really been a large, income generator to begin with. Sometimes when people do their continuing competence audit, they've counted something that was not approved as approved. And so in order to have it count for the maximum number of points, they'll send in an application so that they can make that work. That's more how it is. There aren't a tremendous number of applications coming in. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. So then we have a lot of personnel pages. I guess it's 2 and 3. You've got some more personnel related expenses. And then after that, you've got board meeting or board expenses. So for the board members themselves, and then for various meetings and committees. And then we get into operations is page 4.
I bet the meals, entertainment, and events for staff is probably the lowest it's ever been.
Yeah.
Yeah, those categories, to me, that also needs to be totally revamped, and it's been tricky. But yeah, well, absolutely. And it will stay that way because we haven't gotten there yet, and we really haven't talked about it. But I did in addition to the board survey I did about board meeting attendance, I did one for staff about what do you think you want the world to look like post-COVID in terms of office and office operations, and what do you want to do and all that. Well, the people that are working at home want to stay at home. And the truth of the matter is there is absolutely no reason for them to come back here. Everything that they do is really supported by one or part of another person here in this office. And it is so much more efficient and productive than it has ever been. And I will say, I think I have some perspective on that because I've been here for 13 years. And even though I didn't do licensing, I'm licensing adjacent. And I feel like I've observed long enough that to me, it's just going really well. And I think from the feedback I've gotten from maybe 2-3 board members for sure, they like it that way too. And it's working for them. Now I haven't really solicited, what are the downsides to this from the board. But it appears to me that we could keep everybody at home. And so therefore, the kinds of things that we would do in here, like, we would treat people to lunch on score day because they were kind of sitting at their desks all day long doing scores. Things that we used to do like that, we're just not doing. So
The electronic approval process is certainly very easy.
oh,
Mhm.
life-changing. Yeah, and that just everybody here gets a lot of credit for working on that and making that happen. The addition of David Knoll, y'all, perfect decision at the perfect time to add him as a staff member. I cannot tell you.
Really.
Oh, I guess he's there. He can hear us. He can hear us saying that, but all true. So then otherwise, our operational expenses have decreased as well. So we use the printer as a scanner primarily now. And while we do have copying expenses, you can't tell quite as much from this. We have decreased the amount of just overall office supplies. We might order something once a month. We had a bit of backstock to begin with, but you also don't have people in here using it. And so, we just don't need as many office supplies, including paper. Postage has dropped a lot because we have transitioned things to online forms. They are laser beam focused on trying to get more upload features to the application so that part is not coming in as paper. And we're not having to manipulate the paper and scan the paper and all of that. So, just everything is becoming more efficient electronically. And so that's decreasing those expenses. And of course, because board members couldn't go anywhere, just the generalized expenses, the per diem is probably about the same, but the generalized travel and meeting and subsistence and our expenses are way down. So any specific questions about expense items?
I don't know of any. I do say I do miss the in-person national meetings and so forth. Looking forward to some return to normalcy there and getting to interact with our colleagues in different states and each other.
Absolutely. I was on, Crystal, I don't know whether you went to one of these, but I was on a call recently. They're trying to kind of do some of the same things that they normally would do at the annual meeting, doing them virtually. So they had like these roundtable meetings that they used to do at a dinner meeting recently. And it was funny, the board member liaison group that I was a part of, she was talking about how she was really trying hard to advocate for this return to in-person meetings sooner, but pointed out that different areas of the country are experiencing COVID very differently than we are. And
Right.
they just couldn't
Absolutely.
wait to do that. Yes. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but the truth is, I think as long as things continue with this trend, October 2022 is for sure in California. So I think, we'll make up the lost travel expense for sure. And
I must say,
before that, I don't know. Go
I
ahead.
have enjoyed the FSBPT meetings,
Mm.
the virtual ones, and have participated in most of those. I was in and out of the one yesterday, and it was very detailed and but informative.
Oh, I didn't
They,
hear that.
I didn't do the one yesterday. They have kept up their quality with everything they've done. I did part of the board training last week. I wasn't going to do it because I was supposed to be at work, and then she was trying to get me to do it, and I was like, well, I can do part of it because I had family coming in at that point. So I did all day Thursday, and then I did Friday morning with it, and I did facilitating for some of the breakout tables. And
Oh, yeah.
they've done a great job at trying to maintain the same quality and the same interaction, despite the fact that you're not in person.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one recently that had an international speaker and people from various countries.
Yeah.
Back maybe a month or so ago. That one was very informative.
Because Impetra no longer exists, I think we all realize that the world is a smaller place and that we all have common issues. And so I do think that the Federation will do what it can to, maintain those worldwide connections. I just think it was probably too hard to be the host of all of that, plus do everything that the Federation needed to do. And their main purpose is to, create and maintain and execute the exam. And so you can't spread your pie too thin or your fingers
Right.
too thin and be expected to do, the quality job that you want to do. So as in the words of Bill Hatherill recently, I was speaking to him on the phone, and he said, we really are running lean and mean these days. So I think that's very true, and they're kind of pulled in their focus. But you can see how they're trying to keep up all of the things that they have previously done really, really well. Let's see. Okay, so we looked at the P&L and the budget, or the balance sheet. And what I wanted to say to you is what I'm seeing, and we will probably see at the board meeting when Cindy gives me an updated copy, is that we may even be in the negative, but that is because we have added this additional, or at least from what was budgeted, let me put it that way. We added an additional programmer, and the board had already approved an additional 100,000 that we could spend to add this programmer. So really, in the end, the tale will be told once the audit is done later in the year. But I feel like we're right on target with budget from 2021. So moving on in the agenda to the financial recommendations from 2021, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update. The monies are being moved. The designated reserve for payroll was created, and the 100K was moved into the IT reserve. So that's happened or happening. So the board's goals, financial recommendations for 2021 are being accomplished. Moving on to financial recommendations for consideration for 2020. We've talked a bit about needing to change our financial platform to either QuickBooks Online, or depending on, if someone else has a better recommendation for us, another accounting platform would be where I hope to go in 2022. One of the things that I'll share with you that has been the biggest, probably the biggest frustration about QuickBooks Enterprise for me is that they only have one license, and adding licenses is just like $5,000 or $10,000. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
And so one person has a login. And so one person has it. And it's really not, I don't have the ability to look at it easily. And that is just not good financial management. It's not good checks and balances. And so that's why another reason we just got to move away from it. Talked about hiring the external bookkeeping services, consolidating the accounts, and then the analysis of moving the checking services from PNC to Pinnacle. But we want to do that carefully so that we don't have any disruption in service. In addition to, we need to find out what the costs are and, if they really have the capabilities we need. And then one of the other things I have on here, and whether it becomes something we do in 2022 or 2023, we are growing. And even though we may have just under 14,000 licensees right now, on the books, we have over 20,000 licensees because of people that have licensed and retired, licensed and no longer licensed here, et cetera. But it's managing that huge amount of data and numbers of individuals that, requires constant maintenance. And with the custom programming that we do, it's always going to be very expensive to manage this database. Well, now there are kind of a flood of other licensing database and management systems out on the market. And so we need to do some analysis about whether there is a pro or con to moving or not moving into a bigger system. And what could they do for us, and what would we still have to custom program anyway? For example, are bigger systems set up to do the compact? Maybe not. Are they set up to do criminal background checks? All these things that we have had to add to our system. Can it work as flexibly and as easily, or is it going to end up in the long run just being the same expense? I don't know. But one of the things that you would gain is less management of hardware in here, because they're going to be managed externally. That brings up security concerns. But anyway, that analysis needs to be done, or we need to start planning on that analysis going forward. So we can, kind of at the end, we'll determine which sort of recommendations we want to propose to the board. But that's just the preview for the moment. Some other things that I wanted to bring to your attention are the fact that, well, this I guess goes into the category of new business. The payroll audit that we did from 2018 to 2020, as we said at the last board meeting, there was one final step that had to be addressed, and those were the corrections that were needed to the retirement plan for monies that had not been taken from employee pay and put in the retirement that was due. I think there was sort of a misunderstanding along various places about what things count as income to an employee that you have to take taxes and retirement out of. So those things have been identified and the corrections have been made up to a certain point. 2020 is good. That was all fixed by the end of the year. What we still have left are the corrections from 2018 and 2019 into the retirement plan. So that basically is $650. So we will have to recoup that from each employee. I mean, it's all to their benefit because first of all, it's required that they have to put this money in. What gets hard is that sometimes it's a lot of money if you take it all at once from somebody. So we have to work on a gradual way through to take that back. But then part two is the retirement plan itself has to analyze if that money had been put in at the right time, what would it have earned? And that has to be put back in to their account at the retirement plan. So that analysis is kind of being done as we speak. And I don't know what the total of that is yet. However, that is a board expense and the board will have to pay it. So that was kind of unbudgeted money, but we have enough reserve to be able to cover whatever it is. I can't imagine it's going to be more than a couple $1,000s. I can't imagine it, but who knows? And I'll give you an update, hopefully at the board meeting, if that's ready if that's been finished by them. That is never going to happen again. If I have anything to say about it, it's been a long process because we started this long time ago. And so I'm kind of glad we're done, but I'm also, we are a state agency and we need to be able to say that we are doing things correctly. We need to pay our taxes correctly and we need to give our employees the benefits that they're due.
It's difficult, Kathy. We had gotten large enough that we had to have a external audit, unaffiliated accountant.
Yeah.
And I learned so much.
I'll bet.
If you add in a holiday that you missed, or if somebody didn't key in an hour of payroll and you have to go back and add it later, and if there's not mechanisms to catch that,
right,
so that you take from it, it was quite a process. And so in the end, we went back to, I'm the trustee for the retirement plan, but we also have a management company for it. They had to go back and figure out line by line for the past 3 years, and finally made everything whole magically.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, but it's, I understand the pain. It's quite a challenge, and a lot of little tiny things that you would never think of.
Yep.
And so we, that's something we have to go through every year, is that big audit, and then we make it right. And
That's right.
so
That's right. And none of this was done intentionally, and it's just now we've learned more, and we're going to do our best to not to let it happen again. So I agree with you, David. That's kind of our experience exactly. Okay. So let's talk about the topic of a potential renewal fee deduction or reduction for 2022. And so the evidence I have is that I don't have great SHEPS data to tell me that a lot of people were out of work. I can't support it through that data. But what I can say is that 95% of people who had an active license in 2020 renewed for 2021. So that says that these licenses are needed, or that people were not willing to let them go until they had work again, or whatever, or were working enough that you have to have a license if you're working at all. So if we were, let's just say that we had at the time of renewal, we had 14,000 licensees, and all 14,000 renewed their licenses. And if we charged them $20 less, that's $280,000 of income that we would not gain for the budget for 2022. With the reserves that we have, I feel pretty comfortable with that. But then you factor in the unknowns, and here's an unknown that you guys get the preview of first. As you know, we have an investigative committee. The board is required, when a legitimate complaint comes in, you have to do your due diligence to determine whether that is something that belongs in the purview of our board, and then if there even looks like there's a potential violation, you have to do an investigation to make that determination. We are getting significant numbers of complaints with patient harm. And it's
Oh.
alarming. It's actually, for me, it's alarming. Now, I'm a slightly anxious person, again, more conservative, so I'm alarmed at any patient harm. But it's the frequency has increased. And at the board meeting, I am going to propose that we have a task force initiated on risks and harms in physical therapy practice in North Carolina. And my biggest takeaway related to this renewal fee here is, what if we ended up with another lawsuit? What would happen to us financially should that happen? Well, we did purchase directors and officers insurance. We do have state insurance if it was the right type of litigation that we qualified to receive support from that policy from. We have staff insurance for inadvertent errors that a staff member might make. And then we have these reserves to cover us. There is 800,000, I believe, in the litigation reserve. We also still have a reserve for the building fund, which, may or may not be aimed toward a building anymore. We haven't really revisited that with the board in a while, but those, that money could be reallocated from there. So if the prior litigation was any indication, that was 1.5 million, then we have those monies in reserve. And I am feeling pretty strongly that we don't want to have excessive amounts of reserve. And if we do have them, returning those monies to the licensees would be appropriate on the part of the board. So when I weigh the pros and the cons of that decision, I lean in the direction of recommending a decrease in the renewal fee of $20 for this year. You all can maybe think about that some more and decide. We can propose that, unless you are very opposed to proposing that to the board, and then we can have a discussion about it during the board meeting. And whatever the board decides is fine with me. But I didn't do the proposed budget minus that 280,000. When we discuss the budget, we'll just look at it and know that number is a potential.
Kathy, and this may not be information that you have, the increased complaints of actual harm, is that coming more from long-term care facilities with PDPM changes potentially, or is there a certain sector that we're seeing those
Outpatient orthopedics. With invasive techniques, and I'm very concerned.
Is this an appropriate time to touch on invasive techniques, or would we?
We can. I'm sorry, I think I didn't hear your last part.
Right, and if we can't, that's fine. I'm just trying to get a grasp of the potential risk in weighing out, a change in renewal fees.
Let me say this. You're right. This may be better discussed in closed session. David Gadd was away last week, and he and I have touched on the fact that I think I would like to recommend this to the board to set up a task force, but he and I haven't come up with how we want to discuss it with the board. And because it's an important topic, I don't want to say too much during a public meeting if it should be better done in closed session. So I think we're familiar with this topic because we've been down that road before.
Understood. Yeah, Crystal, please chime in. I'm not sure I would be prepared to make a recommendation on it at this point.
Yeah, I think we need to present it to the board and have a discussion in closed session and make a call after we've had the time to discuss and review more information.
Thank you.
Now that, I think that's a good call. I am planning to send out the board meeting next Tuesday, but one of the things that is not finished is all the initial data that I want to present to you as part of the ClickUp that you'll get. And so, you know, when you read that, you'll have more to think about. So thank you, that's good. Then I do want to bring up potential changes for office operations once the state of emergency is rescinded. And, you know, feel free to give any questions, comments, or, you know, any recommendations that you might have. One of the things that has come up repeatedly with the CAI, which is now Catapult, our HR membership organization that we belong to, they did a survey of working from home and what companies are doing related to their policies about that, which was really helpful and interesting to me because I may not have been clear initially about what we were going to do about people paying for their internet at home. So most people already have internet with a data plan at home that they are using for other purposes. We do have employees here who did not. And I made the call that we weren't going to be able to function if they were not working. So I made the executive decision that we would pay for it, given the fact that we also were you know, not using other resources, that it was just shifted into that. I've shifted some of our operations budget into paying for those internet services. Now, what's interesting is when I look at the data from their survey, there really wasn't a whole lot of difference between exempt employees and non-exempt employees. Only about 40% of companies give a stipend for, you know, using their internet services at home. And but of those companies that did, it was about $60 a month for each employee. Now, that works for everybody, except for the fact that when I have these 1 or 2 employees that don't have good internet service, you know, and when the state of emergency is over and I take away the support, you know, I don't know exactly what's going to come back, but I do need, I need the board's help in, you know, thinking through and making the determination about that. Initially, I was going to propose that we pay a $60 fee to the people that were working from home as a stipend. Then you get into the fact that it's not exactly fair if we don't do that for everyone who has the ability or the requirement to work from home occasionally. Like all the exempt employees, you know, I work at home a lot. I don't need a payment for the internet, but the point being, you know, how are you going to treat all of your employees? And so there's that. But then I started looking at our total compensation package and the benefits that we offer to employees otherwise. And it's a very big percentage of their total compensation, the benefits package itself. And it has everything to do with how old you are, pretty much, because so many of the benefits relate to your health, you know, the life insurance, the health care, the dental, maybe not the dental, but long-term care. And so depending on how old you are, these benefits can really range from, you know, 20 to 40% of somebody's total compensation. And I feel like our employees are reimbursed or not reimbursed, but provided very generously in terms of their benefits from the board. And to continue to add to that over time without taking something away is going to become unsustainable. I am concerned about that. And so I want to treat everyone fairly, but so therefore I feel like I need to make a decision that would be across the board. And so when initially I was going to recommend the $60 stipend, I've looked at it also in context of the fact that they are saving money working at home because there's no commute. They're saving time and they're saving money on gasoline. There's, if saving money meant eating out because you had to go out for lunch or whatever, then, you're saving that. So I'm becoming more comfortable with the idea of not offering that when we make our final call about what the policies are going to be. But I also would appreciate if you all have a different thought or additional thoughts, please share them with me so we can make a recommendation to the board, or I can include it in the budget or not.
I think, guys, that you have to, and this may be a David Gadd question as well, is it's like with payment or patients and insurance, you have to treat everybody the same. You may have to look at categories of primarily at home, may qualify for something, primarily on site, not qualify for a stipend. And just so that each person in a class is treated the same, just as a preventative measure. And I totally agree. It's like, if we have, for example, an employee who's been working remotely, but they don't have internet, then we've been selectively helping.
Absolutely.
Does that put us in a stable legal position as a company? Probably not.
Probably not.
But that's been one of the things where hopefully, hoping for grace, because of the pandemic. But I can certainly see your points on both sides of that, and the fact of needing to establish a firm policy on it.
Well, I can do some more homework on that. That's for sure. I will say that I offered it to everyone, and I have gotten no takers, with the exception of the people who don't have it. And really, they never really see the bill. It just comes to us and we've paid it.
And quite honestly, if you have a paper trail of offering it and it not being accepted, then I think you're on solid ground.
I would say so too.
Okay, thank you. But still, that we have to come up with a solid policy. And there's evidence for it through this CAI data that we have. So I will look further into that. I don't think it's going to drastically change the budget that we've prepared, but because one of the things is, now that we don't have people in here answering the phone, I'm about to recommend getting rid of $250 worth of phone lines per month. And that pretty much kind of covers
evens out with what you're paying. Yeah,
in some ways.
For some data that there was a large percentage of people across multiple professions that said that if they had to go back to in person, that they would change professions.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was one of the news data reports, one of the.
So I remember hearing something about it.
Surveys, yeah.
Interesting. I had not heard that.
And I've run into that. I've had people that's like, well, if you can't let me continue to do telepractice in the schools, then I'll need to look at one of the national companies that's all they do.
Wow, David.
And so we've been seeing a big impact with that. And so it's not hurting us, but I am seeing that trend for people's preferences are changing.
Yeah, there were a couple people that I thought never in a million years they could, they were gonna like live for the day when the state of emergency ended and they come back to the office. Every single one that is working at home now who was here primarily before wants to stay home. And it works. It has worked so well that I mean I feel like, why would I force that alternative?
But from the outside looking in, just signing off on the stuff,
Mm.
to me, it almost seems smoother.
Oh, yes, I can agree with you 100%. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so another little piece, we've reinstated criminal background checks for new hires. We just don't have the longevity of staff. I think we're all handling, confidential and some money stuff, and we just have to, have a little bit of a basis upon which we make hiring decisions. So reinstated that. That's not a big deal at all. Another thing I was concerned about in terms of equity of offering of benefits. A couple of years ago, this is now, golly, maybe even 5 years ago, when I first started, the board opted to change the maximum PTO accrual to 320 hours, which is still exceptionally generous.
Mhm.
But when we did that, it was kind of out of the blue to me, and I hadn't thought about there's this one benefit that's a PTO payout. So anybody that achieves X amount of hours per year has the option to be paid out for it versus taking it. Well, there was no option for that with this 320-hour reduction in the max accrual, and I was worried that maybe we were not being equitable. And I think what I'm realizing is, again, with our very generous benefit offering to begin with, being able to accrue that much vacation is a huge benefit.
Mhm.
But if you had a rainy day and something happened, you have that. There's no need to also be paid out for it. And it was just a matter of, if you're grandfathered into the prior policy, as those people gradually, leave or retire, that policy will eventually go away. So, there are only a few people that ever get there anyway, but it is, as long as, and I can ask that in the context, David, that you asked me before about treating people similarly. I'll ask David Gadd about that too, but that was, I decided that we ought to just leave that as it is. So, unless you had any objections to that. Lastly, at the board meeting, I'm going to make a recommendation to change the personnel policy manual to eliminate this policy that really doesn't even align with Department of Labor policy. There was a thing written in there, and they didn't, how if you're a non-exempt employee and you work more than your 40 hours, if you're assigned that, then you need to be paid overtime, and it's time and a half.
Mhm.
So, you call that comp time or compensatory time. Well, there's a policy in our book that's got compensatory time for exempt employees, which the Department of Labor says you really can't do. And I know why it was created. That reason no longer exists. It was before my time, and I'm going to eliminate it because it's creating difficulty for me with payroll and timesheets.
Mhm.
I'm having to force exempt employees to turn in a timesheet, even though they're also not required to turn in a timesheet, because otherwise I can't apply that policy, and I need to eliminate it. So I'm going to do that. Those are just financially, it doesn't really change things a lot, but I'm going to do that.
Right.
Okay. So without further ado, let's move on to the budget for 2020, 2022. So that is in the spreadsheet. And I'm going to try to get on the screen here if you don't have it, so that way you can just make, wrong thing. Make sure that you've got the same thing, so we're all looking at the same thing. Okay, so at the top, you've got July 2020 to June 30, 2021, and then July 1, 2021 in red to June 30, 2022. So everybody's got that right?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay, great. So some of the things where you see that there is, an numerical line item for it, and there's nothing put in for it, it's because either we don't anticipate that, it's not a normal thing, or the board eliminated it with one of the decisions regarding regulatory flexibility. And I believe that that's what the board will continue to choose to do. Or I didn't have enough data to be able to separate it all out. So when you look at specifically license verification on the income side, this year, we had budgeted $24,000, and that is, it's a portion of the income that we have. What I think we've realized is that with the advent of the compact, some of this is going to go away. And so I don't want to over budget for this. And so when I looked at the data that I was given in the actuals, I did a 12-month average based on the 10 months of data that I had so far. And it ended up being 20,000. So it's down a little bit, and that, I'm going to chalk it up to the compact. I don't know that that's 100% of why. It's probably got something to do with COVID, and that people were not moving around in the same ways that they were before. And so, again, me and being conservative, I think, if anything, it would be more than that. If you look at total PT income, it's a little more for next year than it is for this year. And this number is without the $20 reduction. So, I think that's reasonable. Similarly, PTA income. And then adding revival income to it. We still have a fair amount of people who drop their license for whatever reason and then want it back. And that seems to stay fairly consistent over time. So the final budget is $1,950,000 essentially, which is up, $150,000 from last year. But I think we've got enough wiggle room in there that if it was a little less, would be okay. If it was a little more, we'd be okay. And with the variations that you have sometime in your expenses, then we have that to cover it. In going back to David's point earlier, I tried to provide to you here what the anticipated wage and salary change for an individual would be for 2020 and why. The office administrator that I hired, when I hired her, she was coming in from a different organization at a much, much, much higher salary. And I really wanted her. And this is about what was being paid to Cindy currently. And so in the end, once Cindy retires, it's kind of a wash almost. So we had agreed to a 3% increase at the new fiscal year. And so, but she's going to be at the top end of her range. So we're probably not going to do a lot of increases after that. Executive assistant, this is within market. She's been getting paid this from the beginning, and I'm not changing her salary at all. We did discover, based upon the way our current employee policy manual reads, she was entitled to PTO pay, which I did not know. So she's been basically given an increase through being given a benefit. So I think she's fine. This is various things, little perks, or for my predecessor, they always did a little birthday check and a little holiday check from the board. And, you know, I send a card that basically says the board thanks you for your work. And so I've got that in the budget for that. This is a merit increase for Debbie. She has been a little below where she needed to be. And, you know, the office can't function without her. She supervises the licensing team, and she does amazing work with them. Group of very diverse people that she has really molded into a team. And I cannot, you know, the board, there'd be no way the board would really know that, but I feel like she just needs to be rewarded for that. And we needed to move her up appropriately and pay closer to what she should be in the market and where the board typically pays, which is half or a little over half. Cindy will be leaving, so I've only put in half a year's salary for her. Director of IT, he is supervising additional people and having to do some work. So I think that was a 0.5% increase or 1% increase for him. This is my salary. Then the licensing assistant, that position is not filled. Essentially, that's when we switched over to the executive assistant. So that salary is no longer there. And then systems administrator, this is David. He also was not quite at market, and I needed to make a change to that. And so this is market increase plus a merit increase. The senior licensing specialist here, this is someone who's been here 16, 17 years, and she's at the top of her range. So I'm doing a small bonus for her. The next person, small merit increase. And then the licensing specialist, she also was not quite at market. And so I needed to increase her, and she's also getting a merit increase. All three of them have done really good work transitioning from the office to home. That was very hard and for them. And they've worked and worked and worked and worked their way through it. And so I'm very proud of them and rewarding them in that way. This longevity pay, I realize here I made a little mistake. Oh, no, that's not true. So this is for the people who've been here longer than 10 years and they get a bonus for their longevity. And there's only 2 employees that get that. One of them is Cindy, but hers, it pays out on your anniversary date, and that'll be in fiscal year 2022. So part of that is hers and part of that is the other employees. And then here, David, is that salary supplement. So, you know, here's where the bonuses and other merit increases, you know, other than what we're talking about for the budget would come from, you know, other merit bonus would come from. So I think there's a sufficient amount in there for what I can anticipate anyway. Mm-hmm. PTO payout, this is so dependent on who's choosing to take it. I can probably update that number between now and the board meeting, because now I know who's going to take it for this year, and it's going to be less than 20,000. So, and then these are all, you know, related various tax withhold or other withholdings we have to take. So under wage and salary, it's gone up some because of the increases that we're doing, but then it's going to go back down again once we have a retirement in the second and for the following year. I still put in for tuition reimbursement. We really didn't have a lot of that this year because so much was offered online, but we still need to put it in there because we offer tuition reimbursement as a benefit to employees, but we've never had anybody take it up in the last 5 years. So it's there if it's needed. And then registrations at other courses or conferences. Then we get into the employee benefits, and amazingly enough, this is down a little bit. I don't think we had the increase in health insurance we thought. In fact, it went down a little bit, which I've since heard other people tell me that they've experienced that too for this year. Now, I don't know that that's going to continue, but it's down a little bit.
And the reason for that, Kathy, a lot of people during COVID didn't get elective surgeries or were not able to. So therefore, the insurance companies made too much money.
Aha.
So they had to give some money back. And one of those ways of giving back was a premium break.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you very much for that. So, okay, so we're not going to see that again.
Well, as an employee, I didn't see that reflected.
In your contribution to your portion of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our renewal is November 1st, and I know part of the logic was ours went up very little because of that, because Blue Cross had the extra money not to stick it to us as hard. And but that won't last forever.
That's true. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing is, some of our health insurance is a little higher than maybe it might be otherwise, because we've got 4 people that are over 60, and just because of age, it's going to be more expensive. That's just a fact. But we have the board offers a very generous package to its employees, and I think it's part of the attraction, because we're certainly not paying the highest salaries in the market, but also market mid-range salaries. So, we have the ability to attract really good people, and I think we have, and we are. Okay, so then you've got all the IT consulting expenses right here. Our administrative rules consultant, personnel consultant, that may not even be used this year because we've got such a good in-house person now. I still put it in because I wasn't sure, but I hate to eliminate it in case we have more things like another payroll audit and such where I need that kind of advice. And then, I'm sorry?
The IT consultant special projects, that's the website redesign.
Yeah, and this is actually both of them right here. And I mean, as you know, or at least I imagine, David, you've had to hire somebody in your business. These software programmers, I was told that I was never going to find anybody at the $55 an hour range that I'm paying, because out there in the free world, they're getting $80 an hour. And I just didn't think we could do that financially. And we were very fortunate to find these 2 individuals, but still, it's a big chunk. And this is why I feel like we have got to look at what's out there in the bigger solution world. And, would that, minimize some of our expenses here? Maybe, maybe not. I think because we're still doing so much transition, we have to spend this money.
Right.
We
use a company called Upwork,
uh-huh.
and it has all these different, from all kinds of lines of work.
Hmm.
And like, I have a young lady who's like an MBA and a consultant. She helps me with the retirement, with the credentialing, with the onboarding, with reconciliation of statements and auditing. And she's remote and cheaper than hiring somebody in-house. And then with our IT, we have, I think, 3 different people that we use through that organization. And I think most of those are, like you said, they're around 50 or 60 an hour. And so, that model has certainly worked well for us.
Thank you for sharing that. As we consider what our next step is with that, I think we need to look into that one. Thank you. So then we're getting into the board meetings, et cetera. And this line item right here, this is like other than board meetings. So Finance and Audit Committee, Investigative Committee, Rules Committee, and the per diems and the time that goes along with that we pay. And then, historically, the travel, I guess, is in another category, which is more like up here. But this year I have added this other task force that I would like to stand up if the board approves that. And, I'm sure that it'll probably end up being a hybrid of some in-person and some remote, but I still think we have to plan for that. I think it's really important that we take a deeper dive into that, just because of what we're seeing the trends are. I anticipated some board per diem, could be a little low on that. It's just, I knew that we were going to have 2 or at least 1 more remote. No, that's not true. They're all going to be in-person meetings in fiscal year 2022. So anyway, I think we've historically conservatively budgeted for per diems, because you don't always know who's going to attend like annual meetings and things like that. But I did know that since FSBPT and the compact are having remote annual meetings this year, that there wouldn't be expense related to that. So I didn't include it. Compact, I have included this as a jurisdiction dues amount in anticipation of some things that are being considered at the compact. We don't have a dues fee yet, but we may. And so I needed to include it just to make sure that we had that available. This money is required for delegate travel because the compact doesn't have money to pay for delegate travel. And I just put that in there, but highly likely I'm not going anywhere. Disciplinary expenses, these are, all related to the investigative committee. And Mark Scott, our investigator, is excellent. And, he charges $65 an hour. And when he's traveling, 5 times out to the furthest western point of the state, you have to prepare for that. So, so that's
Right.
decreased a little bit because he's done some of his interviewing on the phone. But
Question, Kathy.
Yes.
The issue we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
would we necessarily see a decrease in that disciplinary expense line, or would we see a trend upward based upon your earlier statement?
Well, I don't know that one will change so much, but let me put it this way. Did either of you attend the one with Malcolm Sparrow? The one that was on regulatory design models or something. I forget the exact title of it.
That was one of the first ones.
It was just last week.
I think
And if it might have been the week before, but it was really recent. And he's either an English or an Australian guy who works at Harvard. He's a Harvard professor.
Oh yeah, I do remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what was clear to me is that we haven't really done a deep dive into what are the risks in physical therapy practice. Do we have rules in place? Is the Practice Act sufficient for really doing all the protections it needs for current practice? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with what we have, but are we also looking at where the biggest risks are to public safety? And do we need to put things into place such as additional education, additional requirements that then need to be managed in terms of a board rule? And do you need staff to assure that those things are being completed by licensees? That's where the expense comes in. It's not necessarily Mark Scott.
Okay, understood.
So that's staff time. And I think the more we continue to streamline licensing, the more time we have available to look at important things with public protection. So I think timing is good. And I think this budget should cover that. Computer supplies, we continue to budget at the same levels that we have. This year, we spent a lot of money on laptops and getting people set up at home. And so we're probably pretty good for 3 years, but you just never know when something's going to break down that you've got to replace. It's pretty expensive, such as a $10,000 server. Phone bill, I still have it as a higher amount, but like I was mentioning, I need to eliminate some phone lines if everybody stays at home. Ongoing warranties expenses, you just have to have those. This Dell warranty that we purchased is awesome. Sometimes they have parts the same day and they've got a person here standing here to put it in when it gets here. So we can't live without that. So SBI, back in the income section, I was saying these are a wash. The $38 that we collect, we turn around and send right back out to the SBI. We do some of our own independent background checks, and that's when we need to, for a licensee that says that they've had discipline and we didn't get enough information from the FBI background check, or when we're adding a new employee. So that's not a big expense. Office operational, maintaining the facility itself. This is the audit that we have done annually, Jerry Dodd. And then our memberships in various organizations, again, credit card fees that they're paid right to the credit card company. So that's a wash as well. Insurances, the bulk of that is the directors and officers insurance at $20,000. Newsletters about as low as it's going to get because that's really all online now. And then FedEx, the postage is decreasing. The more stuff we take online, the less postage we pay, but we still send that postcard. So as long as we continue to send that postcard, there's still going to be, some, because the licensee population is increasing. FedEx postage, that assures that we get those fingerprints directly to the SBI without worry about what's happening with the U.S. Postal Service. And Debbie's going to give you an update on something that happened recently where FedEx lost a packet of these. And, it just lets you know what happens when these things get lost. It's just not good. And so we wanted, really, I mean, we're all kind of still shocked about it, but, so you don't really want those things floating around in just the general mail with so many changes that have happened with the Postal Service this year.
Mm.
And then legal expenses. I have continued to budget the same way that we always have for that. And we don't always use all of it. But we still come out with an income of $85,000. So I feel like this has worked out pretty well. This is what I wanted to show you. I corrected some numbers and updated some numbers from things that the board had approved. And so, it looks like we're 87,000 in the red, but this is without adding back 100,000 that the board had approved for the IT contractor expense. Any questions, concerns, or have we handled those along the way?
I don't have any.
No.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, I guess I don't think you have to have a motion, but if you two would like to agree on whether you'd make a recommendation to propose that the board adopt this budget for 2022, you want to come to a consensus about that, and then it would be your job to do that at the board meeting.
Okay, so do we need to look at dates for the next meeting now?
No. Mm-mm.
No, okay. But you're saying you need a motion now for this?
Well, no, it's just you and Crystal need to decide, is
Right.
this a budget that you would recommend to the board and agree on whether it is or it isn't? And I think you've already said you would do it without recommending the renewal fee reduction.
Right, and
Yeah,
I think we can move forward with it with any potential tweaks that you might make between now and then.
Okay,
And because I didn't realize that there were some things you were going to revisit, but I think this is a good, healthy, document to present for a starting point.
I agree.
great. So when we get to that point in the meeting, I'll just ask, or you can just, or Teresa will recognize you as being able to make that motion to the board.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't think that we have anything else that specifically we have to make a motion about from a financial point of view. The rest of these things are just things that need to happen and will happen. But just so that you all have been updated on them and that you've been given all the details of it so that, so should somebody ask, you could feel comfortable saying that had been explained and there's a reason for it.
Absolutely.
Do either of you have any other business that you think that we ought to be considering as a part of the finance and audit functions of the board?
I don't have anything at present.
I don't either.
Great. Well, then I believe we will just anticipate the next meeting will be May of 2022 to look at the next year's budget and then look at the auditor for the upcoming 3-year term. And if you're ready, we can adjourn the meeting, Mr. Chair.
With the agenda having been completed, the meeting is adjourned at 10:42 a.m.